What do charities need? What do they really need? If you answered funding, well, yeah, you're technically right. But what's more important than that? It's to grow a supportive ecosystem and community. Today, I'm speaking with Jeremie Mani, who is doing exactly this by recruiting every single podcaster he knows into a movement called Podcasthon. So if you're a podcaster, know someone who is, or know a charity that needs to be shown off to the world, you're going to want to get in on this. Welcome back to another episode of Global Health Pursuit, the podcast where we explore the world's most pressing health challenges through a beginner's lens. I'm your host, Hetal Baman, a biomedical engineer turned social impact podcaster, and today's episode is a little bit different because its guiding principle is to serve any and all causes worldwide.
The concept is quite simple, yet somehow powerful to convince as many hosts of podcasts as possible to dedicate one episode of their show to a charity of their choice, and to do that in a coordinated effort. That would be mid-March. So during a span of 7 days from the 15th of March, 2025 to the 21st, 7 days, in which we expect over 1,000 of podcasters worldwide.
It's a global movement called Podcasthon, and it's driven by a simple mission: to unite podcasters in making a positive impact on the world and to use the power of podcasting to raise awareness and support for important causes. We'll talk more about how and why Jeremie and his co-founders took this idea and went for it. But first, I had to know, was he always this altruistic?
I won't lie to you. I won't say that when I was young, I wouldn't say that my objective, my goal was to create something very positive, to have an impact, to build bridges between communities. It was not really the case. I mean, as many young adults at that time, I was more focused on the start of my own career.
That's Jeremie Mani, a seasoned digital entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in the digital landscape. I don't know about you, but it felt refreshing to hear him say that building a social impact business was not really top of mind from the very get-go. I mean, unless you've experienced or witnessed real inequities, you're usually focused on two things: building your career and, two, making the money. As a young adult, he witnessed the dot-com boom in the late 1990s. It was a period of rapid growth in the stock market that was fueled by investments that were made in internet-based companies. And Jeremie found himself in the perfect place at the perfect time with the perfect people.
I was fortunate to spend a semester in Michigan University 25 years ago, in 1999. And at that time, it was a credible period. It was the very beginning of internet, meaning that you could see a lot of .coms ads on billboards, on TV. I was surrounded by students that would split into small groups to create business plan and startups. And I didn't even know what was a business plan and what was a startup. But I just realized quickly that it was a revolution. And so my goal was to be part of this revolution. When I went back in France in 2000, with some friends and partners, we created this first company about the email marketing sector, because that was the beginning of something. And it's not just like you create a company like we do now. It was also this feeling of being part of something bigger than us, that is this internet revolution. That was really my motivation. Then I was lucky to be in Michigan in 1989, and it changed my mind completely. It was a complete change of mindset, and I dropped the marketing career to try to embrace a more internet career, which was something new at that time.
What was it like diving into that? You said that you didn't have any idea what a business plan is.
It's easier now. There's so many online courses that you can follow, you can attend to teach you that. But, at that time, I was 22, 23. I had nothing to lose. It's so easier to create a company when you're a young adult because you don't have any family. You can stay home with your parents. You don't have to spend any rent or something. And if you fail, well, still young, so you can get a job and keep on a normal career in marketing, accountability, finance, or wherever else. I was naive at that time. We were young with no experience. I'm saying we because we were a bunch of 5 co-founders with the same, spirit that just wanted to move forward and try to do something. It's easier to have a storytelling now saying that we had a vision and we wanted to become entrepreneur, but that wasn't really the truth. And the truth is that you're young, you're a bit naive, and you're seeing this revolution and you want to be part of it, and you have an idea, a concept, and you say, why not? Let's have a try. Let's try to get our first clients. And from there, you build the company. But yeah, there was no big vision at that time.
So how long did you work on that?
Yeah, it was a 10 years journey, a bit complicated at the beginning, but the first 2 or 3 years were a bit hectic. But after that, we managed to grow and it was successful. We sold it after roughly 10 years. And it was a great adventure. Only positive things came out of this experience.
He's talking about a company that he co-founded in 2000. It was one of Europe's first email marketing companies. And with his team, he built it from the ground up before a successful sale in 2009. That's almost 10 years of hard work, dedication, and faith without knowing if you'd succeed. If you're an entrepreneur looking for inspiration, make sure to stick around until the very end to hear a clip where we dive a little bit deeper into this. Jeremie then acquired and led a community management company specializing in content moderation. He grew it into a thriving business until selling it in 2019 to pivot into a space he calls digital for good. So you sold those two companies, and then now you're in the space of philanthropy, right? But in the sense of digital for good. Can you explain what that term means for you?
First of all, I have to say that most of the time when you're referring to digital technology, it's related to some kind of bad concept or a bad reputation. Think about hate speech, screen addiction, scam, fake news also. So technology has a bad reputation and many potential harm for society and also for individual. When I was in content moderation, I was able to witness the darker side of the digital world, its toxicity, because that was my job as a moderator and the owner of this company to somehow hide it a bit. It's kind of frustration because you hide it, but you're not solving the problem. I do think that technology is a neutral tool. I mean, it's neither bad or good. It depends on its use. I mean, I'm just stating some very basic thing there, but I do believe it's true. I do believe that there is ways to somehow channel the technology for positive change, and that would be what I'm calling digital for good. I was referring to those first days of internet 25 years ago. And we had this belief, probably a bit naive at the time, that would be a positive revolution, that it would break barriers, that it would reduce costs, that would bring people closer. Somehow it's true. I mean, I'm living in Montreal. My family is in Europe, and my life would be lonelier if I hadn't those tools like FaceTime and WhatsApp. That's definitely a positive tool that didn't exist at the time to connect people and to be closer from your family. But yet we still have a lot of work, let's be honest, to ensure that these digital capabilities are used for a better good. It's not automatic. It requires some conscious effort and intention to tip the balance toward the good. And with this Podcasthon initiative, we are fully aware that we are not changing the world. We are not changing any lives, but we are trying to contribute our small part to the bigger picture.
So tell me about Podcasthon. Where did the idea come from? And why podcasts, right? Because I feel like it's so different, your previous life, right? Your previous life is completely in the tech world, in the business world. And then where did you have the idea that, okay, I'm going to utilize the podcast platform to contribute some good in the world?
It started maybe in 2020. It was clearly a turning point. First, because I moved to Canada, so it's right moment maybe to change life somehow, but also, and probably most importantly, it was a COVID period. That's a period for reflection, on deeper motivation, on purpose. I mean, we were numerous. A lot of people took advantage of this period to decide what they didn't want to keep on doing. And then that was no different. I realized that I had a double chance. First, I could have a comfortable life, but most and foremost, I don't have any frustration. I have no desire of a luxury watch or or sports car or islands, home somewhere in the world. I mean, I do respect people who are passionate about luxury watch, but it's definitely not me. So I had to decide if I wanted to create a third company or do something else. And I had no motivation to create a third company. I mean, most of the time when you create a company, it's to make money, right? But if you don't need more money to buy new things, what the purpose? Don't get me wrong. I'm not Bill Gates. I'm not Sam Altman. I mean, if those guys are playing in major leagues, I would be I don't know, a double A or minor league player, but that's enough to accumulate enough wealth and to have a comfortable life. I had a lot of energy. So I thought to myself that I could maybe use this energy and my skills as an entrepreneur to do something for the others, like problem solving, community building. I'm a doer. Everything related to execution skills, you might use it not to create a company, but to create a charitable organization. And that's where all started. But before arriving to this idea and concept of Podcasthon, we tried different things. The first thing we tried, and I'm saying we because I have a co-founder and friend, Yves Delnat. I'm pleased to name him because we were two in this venture. And the first thing we decided to do in 2021, roughly, is to launch kind of social network dedicated to altruistic people. So I do love this baseline, but it didn't work. I mean, it worked in some point because we managed to have a lot of press coverage, media coverage, and was really positive. But we knew it would be complicated to bring together enough people to have an impact, and we didn't manage to do it. To be honest with you,
When you say social network, what do you mean by that? Like a Facebook?
a bit different, and it's related to the question about technology. I mean, hate speech, fake news have to be counterbalanced by positive stories. I mean, there are a lot of very inspiring stories everywhere, but we don't focus on them because it's normal. Press and media will always focus on two people arguing instead of insisting on hundreds of people working together to build something. It's human nature. We just focus on negative things. We are more stressed by negative things than attracted by positive things.
We are more stressed by negative things than attracted by positive things. What Jeremie is referencing is something called a negativity bias. It's a psychological tendency to give more weight to negative experiences than positive ones, even when they're of equal intensity. In an article by the Decision Lab, they speak about how deeply this bias is wired into our brains. For example, think about receiving 10 compliments in a day, but focusing entirely on the one piece of criticism. This is negativity bias. This bias didn't just appear randomly. It has evolutionary roots. Our ancestors needed to focus on threats like predators or poisonous plants because ignoring them could honestly mean death. Our brains are developed to prioritize dangers. And because that survival mechanism is still with us, our brains sometimes make us feel like failing an exam is the same thing as the world ending. Raise your hand if you felt that way. According to the article, this bias affects decision-making, relationships, and even societal trends. Media, for instance, thrives on negativity because it grabs our attention more easily. Headlines often emphasize fear, danger, or conflict, reinforcing a skewed perception of the world. This helps explain why constant exposure to negative news can make us feel like everything around us is falling apart, even if things are improving in many areas. For example, did you know that only 9% of the world's population live in extreme poverty? In 1980, this number was actually 40%. Most people don't know this, and this is because the news tells us otherwise. We were told that around 100 million people were pushed into poverty during COVID, which was, of course, devastating. But as you can see from a graph taken from Our World in data.org, there certainly is an uptick, but it's not as significant as we would think it to be. Trying to break people's natural negativity bias and encouraging people to actively share positive and good stories was an uphill battle that Jeremie and his team faced. He would say it was even naive. and it created a need to pivot.
The naive concept behind that was to bring together enough people to promote, to share, to amplify the visibility of those inspiring stories. So there was the first thing of spotting the stories. So there could be videos and or articles, and then sharing that to the communities. But we wanted to create a community of people searching actively for positive content and deciding actively to share them to amplify the visibility of those content and then counterbalance the negative sides of the internet by some positive content. Well, that was very theoretical and it didn't work the way we would like, but it was a great experience. I learned a lot from there. And somehow it led us to Podcasthon because just like in a company, when something is not really working the way you like, you adjust it, you adapt yourself. We wanted to do something for charities. You may have heard about this Telethon concept on TV. I don't know if it's very popular in US and elsewhere in the world, but that's, that's when on TV you have a charity and you ask people to donate for charity and create content by showcasing people that desperately need this cause to be solved and things like that. So we were kind of inspired by this event on TV. And somehow I thought to myself, what would be a charitable event in the podcasting industry? That's really the basic question. And from there, we managed to create this podcast initiative. We just put that to at least a dozen of podcasters and saying, we have this idea of trying to create a podcasthon. And here is what it looks like. And to help us to fine tune the formula. And from there, we managed to bring together 20, 30, and 50 podcasters and 100, and word of mouth do its job. And the first edition, that was in France only at the time in 2023, gathered 300 podcasters, which was a great start. To be honest with you, we didn't put on our effort in Podcasthon first. We saw that as a success and we tried something else. We tried to have an impact on LinkedIn too. In 2023, after the success of the first podcast, and we invited the concept of giving link, and the concept was pretty much the same. That is, trying to convince as many influential people on LinkedIn to create a post, to write a post dedicated to a charity and asking for donation for this charity. So we selected, 40 charities and asked those influential people pick one and to write a post for them because they're supposed to be influential. They have communities. And if we could aggregate the number of followers of all those people, that would lead us to over 6 or 7 million of followers. So that was theoretically significant, but didn't work as we wanted. We managed to get those 150 people, but the donation were a bit disappointing. So that's where we realized that Podcasthon was our best shot. We need to focus on this initiative and drop the others to be 100% focused on this initiative. So we had a second edition in 2024 with not only 400 podcasters, but many partners like Apple Podcasts, Acast, Spotify, a lot of others. And it became much more structured. In 2025, we will open it to English-speaking podcasters. It's a huge shift and a great challenge because we're starting from scratch in US, in UK, in Canada, in Australia, in, South Africa and many other countries, in India for sure. It's also because I need to showcase the fact that it took time from 2020 till now to arrive to this podcast.
I feel like, what I'm hearing is you have to pivot multiple times to see what works. But was the main goal for starting this type of initiative to raise money? And that would be the quantifying factor to see, okay, this event was successful because we raised X number of dollars for these charitable organizations that are featured on these podcasts.
Right. I mean, it's a learning curve. And to be completely honest with you, that was our first intention at the very beginning with the very first Podcasthon to raise money for charities. And then we quickly realized that it was not the case, probably because podcasting is not the best medium to do that. There is no urgency behind it. You can listen to an episode 6 months later and it will be still valid and interesting. And also because, that's not the strength of podcasts. And on the contrary, podcasting is probably the best medium to convey emotion, to tell stories, to take time to have a nuanced speech. That's what it takes for charities to connect with a larger audience. So the feedback of the charities after the first podcast were, we don't really expect you to collect money because it takes time. If you put us into a relation with a new listener, it would be hardly surprising that it will donate immediately because it takes time, to plant a seed and see it grow. And it was a common speech from very large NGO to local charity. It was a very common point. What we need, they said, is to enlarge a circle of our supporters, meaning our potential donators, our potential volunteers, anyone that would be eager to share our content or be more interested in what we are doing. And with time, that's our job to transform them into potential donators or whatever else. Please keep on connecting us with new audiences. We found that there was a match there because you podcasters, you're great in storytelling, in gathering a loyal audience. And on the other hand, charities, they need to be connected with new audiences. If you think about that, there is many other ways to collect money, to donate. Marathons, phone-ins, auctions, you name it. I mean, they found out to be very effective in raising money for charities. But it's more complicated for those events to bring to the table new audiences. And we are trying to be a bit innovative in that sense, not searching for very strict KPIs. And we don't care about KPIs. We are just convinced that it's very positive to put into relation a charity with a new audience. And with your talent as podcasters, you will be able to ask the good questions and put in value maybe a representative of a charity during the episode. So my conviction, my belief is that after listening such an episode, something will happen. I mean, there's better chance that you might be touched and you would be eager to do something at the end of the day to help them. Maybe not immediately, but maybe in the future.
I can tell you that is exactly what happens because I have heard people from my own podcast episodes to say, hey, I learned about this nonprofit through your podcast. I reached out to them and now I'm an intern. Or I got connected with their founder. Or I've learned something new about this issue. I think that's what you're saying. You want to plant the seed in whatever cause you're talking about within that specific episode. And then also, like, after podcasts are released, right, there's marketing effort, right? So it's not just the audio that comes out. You're also releasing the reels and the posts so that if people don't listen to the episode, you're still hearing about the specific charity through different mediums. The podcast is just the centralized thing, and then everything else kind of comes out of it. Stay tuned. We've got more after this quick break. Did you know your wallet holds more power than you think? If you're enjoying this podcast, I've got another podcast I think you'll absolutely love. It's called Progressive Pockets, and it dives into how we can use our spending to shape the world we want to live in. Gigi, the host and a new friend of mine, does an amazing job of breaking down how our everyday purchases, whether it's buying groceries, investing, or choosing where to shop, can actually make a difference. In every episode, she shares small, actionable steps to meet you where you are and help you become more intentional about aligning your money with your values. I especially love the episodes where she digs into how different demographics of people spend their money. She even has episodes breaking down the spending of major celebrities like Chrissy Teigen and Taylor Swift. Once you're done with this episode, check out Progressive Pockets wherever you get your podcasts. Find a link in the description below. Now back to the episode.
Podcasters are a great community. I mean it. You guys are passionate. Most of you maybe don't make money out of podcasts. It's more passion things. And when you combine passion on the one hand and charity on the other hand, it's a great combo. I mean, and most of the time those Podcasthon episodes are just great. I mean, so inspiring. I know inspiring is a word that we use so many times and probably too often, but I mean, I have so many anecdotes and so many episodes in mind where I was personally moved, touched, and well, I do believe that when you listen to such episode with the heart, because it's done with the heart and with passion, you definitely want to be closer to this specific charity, because that's really a medium with intimacy, with connection. It's almost like we are talking a one-on-one conversation. Even though you're listeners, it feels like podcasters are talking to you or just in front of you. That's a little bit of magic that you can't find on social media, like, I don't know, a 30-second video on Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah.
You can't expect from that the same
Mhm.
awareness or the same impact.
It's a commitment. You're committing 30 minutes to 2 hours a day, and you obviously think that you're gonna get something out of it. Once you say, "Oh, I love this podcast because of the host or the topics," then you become like a companion. Podcasting is such a companion medium where you're washing the dishes, you're listening to something, you're walking, you're listening to something, you're driving, you're also listening to something. You're bringing it along with you like a companion, and that's why I feel like this is the perfect medium to really get close to a specific cause. On my podcast, we talk about all different global health topics. I just recently learned about my cycle, menstrual health. I'm 33 years old. How do I not know about this stuff? And then through that, learning about a brand that really cares about the planet, but then also period products in that sense and how they meld it, right? Through podcasts, you make a friend, right? It's like I'm sitting here with my friend and I'm learning about something. And it's just, I think that's the perfect medium.
And your listeners will trust you because they are accustomed to hearing your voice. Maybe one of the reasons of the success, if I may use this word, of the podcast lies in the fact that you, podcasters, decide which charity you want to highlight. We are not importing a charity or even a cause. And it was something that sounds maybe anecdotic at the very beginning, but I'm now convinced that it was core part of the success, because it led to a kind of alignment between your value, your theme of your editorial line, and also what is expected from your audience. So you might listen to podcasts about, environment, about against poverty, about, I mean, I can't name all of them, but there's so many causes. And there would be a huge diversity of theme and causes addressed in this podcast by at least one podcasters. So there is room for everyone, but most of them there would be a bit of your heart into it, because you're choosing as a charity. So that's not something you do because you've been asked to, but because you do believe it's a good thing to promote, to highlight this specific charity instead of others. And you will get a chance next year to choose another one. So yeah, there will be room for several of them.
So when is Podcasthon happening? What is the plan? You're saying you're gathering all of these podcasters who care about specific causes. How is all of this structured?
The concept is quite simple, yet somehow powerful, to convince as many hosts of podcasts as possible to dedicate one episode of their show to a charity of their choice, and to do that in a coordinated effort. That would be mid-March. So during a span of 7 days, from the 15th of March 2025 to the 21st, 7 days, in which we expect over 1,000 of podcasters worldwide. There is this idea of convincing so many podcasters to release an episode showcasing a charity of their choice. The coordinated effort makes it an event, and that's enabling us as an organizing team to partner with organizations like ACAST, Spotify, Pod News, and many others to amplify the visibility of this initiative. And in this platform, podcasthon.org, will be listed all the episodes, country by country, language by language. For the moment, it's just French and English, but that would be part of a future plan maybe to extend it to other languages. So in 2025, you can expect over 1,000 episodes from different countries promoting different kind of charities. And we hope that many, many curious people will connect to this platform and discover those episodes. And obviously, all those podcasters will promote their own episode through their own platforms. And that would contribute to the atmosphere and the enthusiasm around this initiative. It's all about raising awareness. That's really the core objective. The main objective is to raise awareness. We believe that it's the main strength of podcasting, and that's what charity needs. We are expecting millions of hours of impactful audio content. We don't know exactly. We'll never know, to be honest with you, but that's not the point. The point is that we manage somehow to bring together a community of value-driven podcasters coordinating their efforts to create this event. And we want to thank them because it takes time to create an episode. It's always great when they can take some time to participate to such a nonprofit initiative.
Yeah. So if you're listening to this and you have a podcast and you have a charity that you want to feature, there's so much time to register.
There is 2 registration links. I just wanted to insist on the point you were saying, because if you're a charity too, you might be tempted to shout out and say, hey, here we are. We want to be invited at the mic. And we do have a form for that. So that will be on our platform. Then you can just register yourself. Doesn't mean that you will be invited automatically, but at least you will be displayed on a website on a list. And this list is shared to any registered podcasters. So 900 so far. And for any podcaster might not be completely at ease with finding a charity or may not have contacts, then it's a valuable sources of inspiration for them. They can select with keywords a few charities and then decide which one they want to invite. I do encourage you, if you're a charity, to register. And for sure, if you're a podcaster too, you're more than welcome to participate. It's not too late.
Podcasthon is happening in just a month's time and runs from March 15th to March 21st. So like Jeremie said, if you're interested in participating as a podcaster or even just a listener when the event is launched, make sure to register or sign up to receive their newsletter at podcasthon.org. I'll leave the links in the description below. And if you're wondering, I'll of course be participating in this event. So make sure that you're following this podcast wherever you're listening, because on the week of March 15th, I'm releasing an episode featuring an organization that you won't want to miss. If you have any questions at all, you can comment below if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, or shoot me an email at hethel@globalhealthpursuit.com. Now, if you're still listening, I've got a little bonus bit of inspiration, especially if you're an entrepreneur or aspire to run your own business one day. Here's a little bit of light for you. I was looking at your history, and you started this company around 2000. You mentioned that you didn't get your first sale until 5 or 6 years down the line. That gives me motivation, and I think people listening to this motivation, because things take time. We need to think about our small wins along the way, and that people are seeing that, and that eventually something will pay off after having failures. And so that's where I felt inspired.
Yeah, I mean, it would be easy for me to tell a story about my career and saying it started 25 years ago and I could sell 2 companies and I was a successful entrepreneur, but that's not exactly how it worked. If you look at details, if you have a closer look at it, I can confess that, for example, after 2 years or 3 of being entrepreneurs, I was about to stop and quit because it was not working the way I wanted and it was more complicated than I thought. So it was tempting, to just do something else and quit. Thankfully, I didn't do it and I kept on. And at the end of the day, it became a success. It takes flexibility, it takes patience, it takes trying things, not to stick to the original plan. Just move forward, just move. And you will meet people that will change the curb of your company, that will give you ideas. You will meet people that will become potential clients and help you develop your company because they will trust you. You will recruit people maybe that will completely change the mindset of your company, as long as you're moving things with a positive outcome. So that's really a learning. Trust yourself, but be flexible. Don't be stubborn and just move forward. It's a question of you need to listen to people, but take decisions. It doesn't mean you have to do what people tell you, but it's good to listen to people because that you can get inspiration from that. You can see your situation from a different angle and make new choices that will prove efficient in the long run. So that's what I mean by not being too stubborn. Sometimes we have a plan in mind and we want to stick to the plan, whatever happens. You don't have to change plan every other day, but you might be able to change plans from time to time if it's not working the way you like. So that's difficult to judge when you need to evolve, but that's something you learn with experience. To get experience, you need to be patient.